But yeah, I've been coming to this meetup for a really long time. I've gotten a lot of valuable information from it, and I hope that you folks all do tonight as well.
All right. Awesome, awesome. So, for those of you that don't know, Dustin Collins was one of the core organizers with me. We've been doing this for quite some time. He has actually moved out to Kansas City to be closer to family. So he's still part of the community. He's going to be working remotely for Conjure. I'm not sure if you guys know that, the security appliance company based in Waltham. He's still on the Slack channel through all of the main vehicles of which we communicate with chat ops. Got to give it hugs. He'll be around next week, but so that's why we brought Laura in. We had a great conversation. She's been one who's always been involved, contributing to the open spaces, providing valuable information and interesting questions to address with the community. So we want to give her a big, warm DevOps welcome, and really excited to have her a part of my organizing team. So for the next year, what we're going to be looking for is, for all the new members who are attending for the first time, if you guys want to be a part as a sponsor, please come talk to me. Like, we're always looking for new vendor sponsors, new food beverage sponsors. We host socials, and we do a lot of collaborative type events, not only with like config management, AWS, etc. But our goal is to really get everybody together, have a good time, talk about different things, really get to know one another, right? The whole idea is unit integrity. When you start to learn some personal things about the person sitting to the right and left of you, you end up caring a little bit more. And really that's our ultimate goal, right? Our community is very tight-knit, it's very small, and we're out there trying to solve some serious challenges. So the idea is, strength is in unity, and we're going to constantly work towards that. So definitely, please come talk to me, come talk to Laura, ping us on the Slack channel. If you guys aren't on the Slack channel, I'll send out a link for it. But it's a great place to kind of get ideas, ask questions. You have the whole community who's here that you can leverage for some good answers. To that note, I want to introduce you guys to James. For those who don't know James, James is with Acquia. Thank you, Acquia, for allowing us to come into this beautiful space and hosting this event. I just want to hand it over to James so he can tell you a little bit about himself and the Acquia team and what they're doing here.
Thank you very much. Hi, I'm James. I've been with Acquia for about 3 years now with the operations team, and honestly, there's no other place I'd rather be. The organization started back in 2007, really as a one-stop shop for the Drupal content management system. And since then, it's grown into a real digital experiences organization with a diverse portfolio of different services and different platforms that we interact with, as well as different AWS technologies that we leverage. And through that, we have transformed dramatically. When I was here 3 years ago, or when I first started 3 years ago, we were in a much different position. We were at, I think, 1/5 the staffing approximately. We were only really covering a couple different regions, at least from the operations perspective. We were still heavily siloed off from the development portion of the engineering team versus the operations team, which was handling the day-to-day fires. Production is down, somebody's database is dropped, some task has failed somewhere along the line. That's where we come in. I've spent the better part of that time actually working with Amin, who's transitioned several times. Amin is here in a blue shirt. Wonderful resource for technical and for really human concerns here in the team. Been a pleasure working under him. Ask him any question, he'll have an answer for you, I guarantee it. But we've transitioned so much in that 3 years. We've gone from a truly siloed, really closed off sort of environment to a much more integrated, collaborative setup within our organization. We've restructured teams. We've gone into much smaller, more agile teams to work on really tough problems. And now that we're at 5, 6, maybe 10x what we were in terms of scale 3 or 4 years ago, those challenges are now those challenges have mounted to a point to where we can no longer ignore it. And really the DevOps ethos has really given us the ability to really look at things from a holistic perspective, which is the reason why I push so hard to try and bring Boston DevOps Meetup here, because I feel like the community and Acquia have a lot in common. The community is very much focused on free and open source software, focused on robust, reliable, resilient platforms and services, and I feel that everyone here can probably share horror stories with each other till the end of time about being woken up at 3 in the morning for some god-awful system that was built by somebody who's not even there. So with that, I want to go ahead and express a special set of thanks. First to David Dustin for agreeing to host here, for letting Acquia bring the event here. Drew Robertson, who's actually internal here at Acquia, he's with the media team. He's done quite a bit of work in logos and that sort of thing for the meetup, even though it's not up at the moment. I apologize. And there's a whole litany of other logistical and leadership names that I want to call out. Specifically, Karen Cortina for being logistical wizard, Claire Madden and Liam McGee for also being logistical wizards that they are. Also, Chris Stone, Chief Products Officer, Will O'Keefe, the VP of Global Support, and John O'Keefe for their continued support of the DevOps initiatives internally here at the organization. And really, again, to you, the Boston DevOps community, for continuing to be a community that continues to grow and continues to impress me, day after day, week after week. So thank you for coming, and I hope you walk away with something that is helpful and beneficial to you. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, James. Elegantly spoken right there. So, hey, why are we here, right? Today, we are talking about something that's very, very close and dear to my heart, in kind of expressing how engineers can be getting outside of their quote-unquote four walls and engaging with other departments to break down walls, not only between the traditional ops and dev, but also through marketing, sales, the recruiting, HR departments, outreach groups, basically being brand ambassadors within an organization. That's easily said versus done, right? So our talks today, they're going to be lightning talks, are going to be focused on what some organizations are doing and some of the leaders in those organizations that have been successful in enabling for best practices in cross-functional collaboration. You guys to Jeff Dillon. Jeff, can you come up here? So Jeff is from Wayfair, and as all of you guys know, we got a lot. Wayfair has really been hitting the market strong. One of the largest retailers for furniture online, dealing with huge scaling and growth. So we really felt it was real interesting for Jeff to be able to come in and talk about, in the enterprise level, how do you foster, encourage, and embrace collaboration across functions. So that's what his discussion is going to be about. So Jeff, really looking forward to it. Excited to hear you speak. Here he is.
Hi, everybody. How do I work the mouse?
Oh yeah, James?
What's up?
Sorry.
That's all right. So thanks for accepting my talk. I kind of wanted to do this because
Take a second.
we're 800 engineers and we hired 200 since January 1st. And down in Copley, we're 2,000 people total. So we're basically as enterprise gets, but we kind of act like a lot of small startups all under the same building. Because of this, I had experiences at a startup, I had experiences at very monolithic enterprises, so it was real interesting the position I'm in now and just kind of talk about, how it works, what doesn't, physical barriers, and so forth.
Upstairs.
No worries.
Yeah, sorry.
Is there a clicker I can follow, or control?
Yeah, that's. I think he's.
Or is it the wave?
There you go.
What's this go here?
Click that USB.
Yeah, it's USB.
Yeah, just pop on the USB on the. What do you?
Where's the slides?
Oh, they're on the deck. They're on.
Technical difficulties.
Oh, they're on the meetup. Yeah. you have a, sorry.
No worries.
Yeah.
Well, I have them on my phone, so I'll start.
Yeah,
that way we're
sorry
not,
about that. So we should have probably had a little bit of A/B test. Sorry.
No.
Anyone in operations in the room?
So the title is Collaboration with 2,000 People. Kind of why does, I really like these meta talks. You know, there's the code talks and then there's the personality talks, the psychological talks. I really enjoy this because it is a complex system and you need information to flow through the system. So what's kind of the fine balance, we call it, between shouting and whispering. So you have 2,000 people. Do you email everybody when you're doing a major change? Do you whisper to certain groups and let it propagate out? So there are lessons to be learned. I'm sure some of us with larger groups, we've kind of not wanted to shout to everybody at the same time, because obviously if it goes wrong, more people know about it going wrong. And kind of how does that relate to what a startup would do compared to what an enterprise would do, traditional? And how does it relate to more of, what these modern enterprises are kind of embracing from the lessons learned? So ideally we found 4 barriers. There's the physical barrier that's stopping collaboration, literally walls, floors, obstructions between you and the person that you're trying to communicate to. There's the time barrier, and the time barrier could be different shifts. How many of you are running a 24/7 ops shift? How many have folks in different countries or different time zones? So there's your time barrier there. How many people deal with the absence of time, where there's not enough hours in the day to get your tickets done? You have that continuous queue of tickets. There's the communication barrier, phone, chat, language, especially if you're a global company and you're handing off to, UK is handing off to you, you're handing off to Asia, you're handing off to India. So we kind of start in the beginning, and I know everybody hates the word hack because it's been used probably for a decade now in the wrong terms, but we like to say hack your environment. So first, how do you hack your physical environment? How do you open up collaboration in that means? Literally knock down walls. Thank you for hosting this here, because this is the perfect example of knocking down your walls in this type of situation. You've had, how many of you work at offices that have kind of the eye-level cubes? And, how does that make you feel? Does it feel similar to New York City, where it's that concrete canyon of a bit of induced stress, a bit of flow, where something of this nature feels like a restaurant? You're naturally more calm, you're naturally more productive. So open floor plans, a lot of people, or actually not a lot, some will be against it, especially the introverts in the crowd. It does kind of bring a nervousness to it, but traditionally most personalities will enjoy more of an open state like this. But at Wayfair in particular, we are pretty much like this. You can see wall-to-wall desks and everybody sitting. How do you get work done? How, when you're coding, do you literally say, nobody bother me, even though you can all look me in the eyes? We do follow the normal headphone rule. If you see headphones in, don't talk to that person whatsoever. But one of the big things is everybody has a laptop. There's no desktops. I can pick up my laptop and go to designated quiet areas and get my work done through Wi-Fi, through VPN. It allows me both the collaboration that an open space gives, but at the same time, I can walk away and get what I have to get done, and people will leave me alone during those times. Basically, you ask the question, what is stopping, say, Joe, for example. My friend Joe, what is stopping you from communicating with me physically? If you're sitting there and I'm sitting right here, we have this giant wall in front of us. So I took a 3D art class back in college, and one of the art things that we had to do was control people, control flow with art. Everyone's been to the city where you saw those big paintings on the ground. Naturally, you don't want to step on that painting. That's a fake barrier. That's a fake physical barrier. That's literally not stopping you from me from walking to you, but you have this kind of induced route that you're leading human beings around. Office design, I think, doesn't really take that into consideration. A lot of it is fire code, obviously, but you do want to pack a lot of people into a single space. But are you affecting your communication in your building right now just by the way it was designed, or where you're putting a table, where you're putting the lunchroom? So the final thing for physical is there's a thing in physics called volumetric rate. It's how much stuff you can shove through a pipe at any one given time. So traffic's a good example. You go from 4 lanes to 2 lanes, and naturally you slow down your flow or rate. It's very similar to kind of the hallways in your office. The tighter the spanses, the less, I guess, effective communication you'll get from collaboration compared to having these big walls, and I'll send somebody a chat and say, I'm having a problem. There's the instant collaboration amongst me. There's no physical barrier there. So now your time barrier, it kind of breaks up into 2 parts. You have your physical time that you can control, what you work on, who you turn away. Then you have the time you can't control, the ticking of the clock. So what we've done at previous jobs, especially for folks with that follow the sun method, is if you are a developer in the UK, you deploy during UK hours and operations during UK times. You can't deploy in Boston and hand it over to the India office to support that. Something Google does is if you're a developer and you have a deployment, you monitor and maintain that deployment the first 6 months to guarantee that it's ready to hand off to the ops team. I really like that practice. It's hard to get in the place because it will slow down flow if you don't have a proper continuous integration going or a nice fast deployment. So it's a hit or miss, but I guess back to the time barrier, if you're doing fast changes, which is the big theme with DevOps, you will better control your time and break down that barrier. So then we go to the time that you can control. You cannot measure your time if you cannot control it. Actually, did I say that right? No. If you cannot measure your time, you cannot control it. The rule we do at Wayfair, all requests are a ticket. There's no drive-bys whatsoever, no favors, no going to managers. It's a hard practice at first, but something a very good manager of mine did years ago said, measure your time for 1 week and then show it to me, and you will be shocked at how many favors that you're doing for friends. Just because, A, they helped you in the past, you owe them, but at the same time, that adds up and that affects other projects, especially business projects that you're assigned. And I lost my slide. How am I on time? Good?
Yeah.
Perfect. So, hack your communication. Slack's huge. ChatOps is huge. I've been doing this for about 15 years. I moisturize, that's why I look young. But I remember back in the day, you know, we almost wish, I'm like, wow, do you remember the AOL chat rooms? I wish we had something like this for work, just because I'm sick of emailing everybody. So that communication of just Slack and Skype for Business, or even the Skype meeting rooms, you know, for like, you know, across nation meetings, like that's a huge thing to break down the barrier, but there's other barriers. One of them for us was basically the language barrier. I had folks that I was managing in Chennai and woken up in the middle of the night, they're fine, but if we're on the phone talking, they understand English, but they have a very thick accent, and when I get kind of frustrated about stuff, my New Jersey accent comes out. So I'd imagine the same thing happens to them, where they're thinking, I can't understand this guy's going a million miles an hour. So we decided to kind of hack that, typing only, you know, and through these chat up, like especially Slack, like, you know, it's easy for him in the middle of the night to type in plain English to me to reply and not waste any time whatsoever in that barrier. And big thing that we do at Wayfair is, everybody knows what a Kanban board is. We display them literally on every group. So if you walk by my team and you're wondering where your ticket is, where your project is, you don't have to talk to anybody. You just look at the damn board. Every team does that. So that kind of hacks your communication, because you're cutting off that person from bothering somebody, taking them away from that moment, and being able to see what they need to see right away. You can even digitally display your Kanban boards with your Jira, for example. So display your work. Make your work as transparent as possible. You will naturally answer questions that are going to come your way anyways. The military does something very familiar that if anybody here's a project manager, have you ever managed a project and had to manage 20 people with that? Military platoons will follow something called assigned headquarters. So if they're given a mission, you're a mission leader, you're given so many soldiers to come about that. If they decide that you need more resources, you'll hit a cap and they'll assign a second leader and build the pyramid up. That way, say a lieutenant colonel, for example, who's in charge of 1,000 people, he's literally 4 people away from every single soldier. So one of the practices that we enjoy doing, especially for project management, is if you get that big of a team, you have 2 project managers on that and assign them a single leader, just to kind of induce the flow of communication so that one project manager isn't completely burdened with answering the 20 people and scheduling 20 people. And finally, if I can read this. So, this is the tricky one. Originally the slide said hack humans, but then I crossed it off and I put persuade humans. Humans, everybody has that kind of human constraint, and it's kind of the hardest thing to fix for collaboration because there's a behavior you have to change. So I've kind of found that there's never such thing as a true skeptic. Whenever you're trying to change behavior, you're usually going against somebody that has a belief system that's backed up by experience. So for you to go in and you probably are right with what you're trying to do, you're trying to change something that they physically in their mind have proof that works the way that they expect it to work. So the best way to do that is what I like to call the inception method, where you start planting very small ideas weeks in advance. Have lunch. The very small thing of, oh, what if we do this? Oh, eventually, oh, maybe we can do this. For example, we're trying to DevOps our Windows environment, and that's my main goal at Wayfair, is to kind of DevOps-size every single Windows server. That's a hard culture to beat because you have system administrators with 20 years with the GUI under their belt. To tell them that when Nano Server comes out and we're using it, there's no GUI, and they have to, follow the Linux method of everything, and everything's by code. To kind of shock and awe them with that and say, give a presentation, here's what you're doing in 6 months, prepare, that's not going to happen. So we kind of start small, and I'll have little small ideas of, wow, look at this, they're not going to support this anymore, they're going to be doing this. And eventually, if you do it early enough, I found that they come back around and tell me the same ideas that I told them weeks ago. And I'm like, perfect. I'm letting the idea flow down, and you're almost convinced that it was your idea. That's all I have. Any questions?
Thank you very much, Jeff, and apologize for that technical difficulty. Way to riff, man. That was way to rock it out. What we're going to do is we're going to be bringing, I forgot to announce this, but we'll be bringing all of our presenters up at the very end for a Q&A session. This way you'll be able to hear all of the talks, understand what every group, each talk presenter is dealing with, and you'll be able to then ask them as a panel. So without further ado, I want to introduce you to a good friend, Miles from Blue Box. He's here to speak about some interesting stuff, and the main thing being deploying software is hard. So how do we make it easier through collaboration and working with other departments? Want him to get set up, and without further ado, here's Miles.
Hi, everybody. Let me see if I can remember to eat the mic and get a volume. That's cool. Bless you.
Thank you.
So I'm Miles. I've been around for a while. I like to break stuff and help organize things. I like to make bad decisions also, which usually involves all of those things. I helped run DevOps Days Boston. If you were attended, I was one of the people up on stage. Anyway, this is me, my talk. Deploying software is hard. If you work in operations, if you work in development, you likely know that's true. So this is my story. I work for Blue Box. I accidentally work for IBM now. They acquired us just over a year ago. I joined a startup that was maybe 60 people, and it was 5 of us working on OpenStack. That's our product. We do OpenStack as a service, which basically means we manage it for you, because if anybody has tried to deploy OpenStack on their own, you can probably get it up and running, but you probably can't manage it. So that's what we do instead. We do dedicated on-premises. We started the project in October 2013, but previously we had done managed hosting. We did our own cloud offering. It was an interesting time. The company had been around for about 16 years prior to that. I joined in June 2014. We brought on a bunch more people after the fact, and it was pretty fun. So what's this really about? 3 things. So people, process, tools. I'm certain everybody has heard that before. It is not that a new concept, which is exactly the point. We're not trying to innovate in this space. We're trying to execute, and that's how you get acquired, accidentally, unless you're the founder. So for us, it came down to reliable people, as we said, a solid process. So what I mean by solid is that every single person involved in the deployment, in engineering, they understand end-to-end how something gets completed. And with our tools, we're always improving them. If operations has a problem, if it's difficult to do something, that's a bug. We take the Logstash, the Elk approach of, if this is not intuitive, that's a bug. We should fix that. The process itself should be mostly self-explanatory. It's been interesting to see how that's evolved, especially as we've scaled our team. So going from the 5 of us working on OpenStack, or 2 of us at one point, to I think we have over 200 people within operations and engineering now around OpenStack with IBM. So these are some of the people I work with. Chris Wheeler, he's our ops team lead. He came from IBM. At first, we really disliked him because of that. Turns out he actually knows a ton of stuff, and he has tons of connections. That's super useful when you get acquired by a company. So he knows how things work. He knows backdoors. So as you're talking about doing things for friends, sometimes in an enterprise, that's the only way to make progress. The other thing is he always delivers. He's reliable. That's huge. You need to be able to count on people to come through, and not just for him, but his team and how he manages those priorities. Oh, wrong button. There we go. Ulysses, he came from Blue Box. Then he started in 2012. So he has the history. He understands the old tools we had and where those came from, why they were developed, and all the problems with them that we have not fixed over the years. So when something blows up, I can go to him and talk about, hey, what's going on here? This makes no sense. And he's like, well, it makes sense if you know about this context and this customer that we had who paid us a large sum of money because they wanted this thing done. Oh, okay. I guess you're right. Again, he always delivers. We can trust him. Sina, he's our awesome guy down under. He runs second shift. I spend way too much time with this guy because I work into the night too much. But he makes sure that all the developments and if we start a deployment for an OpenStack cluster midday, for some reason, have to get it out, got SLAs, he will lead the shift taking over and continuing pushing that out. It's not a fully automated process, but it's good enough where we've got over 100 OpenStack clusters around the world, and I think 16 data centers now that we're all managing with a team of, 30 operations engineers and probably 15 to 20 specific core OpenStack engineers. So everybody else is working on other stuff. Again, he's from IBM, he got hired into our stuff, but he's an OpenStack expert. That's key for us because we're trying to figure out, okay, what are the weak points that each person has and each team has? How do we fill those? We fill those with people. Jesse Keating's our OpenStack engineering team lead, OpenStack expert. That's what he does. He kind of hates his job because he's team lead now. That's his role. He has to be in meetings, he deals with our priorities. And this is his PR reviewing face. I've literally seen this face when I've seen him in the Seattle office. It's actually quite fantastic. Paul Zarkowski is currently my team lead. He really loves to cook. So it's really funny. If he gets frustrated, he'll just go drop offline and go cooking, and I'll do a competition for the weekend or something. He ships POCs faster than I can cry. This is a true story where I'll say, hey, we should do this thing, and he'll have code for it in a couple hours. I'm like, that code is horrible. We can't run that, but it works. Okay, you're not right. I mean, you are right, but he's also my team's poop umbrella. I'm assuming anybody else here has those. They are wonderful people that subject themselves to horrible conditions generally, and so many more. I do not have a picture of every person. I actually now have a goal of that, of everyone I work with. When I get the chance to see them, I'm going to try and take a photo with that person and do stuff. So our process. IBM is going to IBM, and that slide got messed up. Darn. Compliance is hard. That's basically what IBM sells. Compliance and custom solutions to solve your business need. Silos make auditors really, really happy. They're constantly telling us that we're doing something wrong because we don't have enough separation between development and operations. We need to go through change control. Everything should be a ticket. That doesn't work. The handoff time within a deployment pipeline is not fast enough for us. So every opportunity that we've had, we automate that. Products go to die in tickets and in handoffs. That's our fundamental belief as a startup that we brought into IBM and will always fight for. Previously, they escalated all the problems. So every team who consumed from us would escalate to their manager if we didn't hit their SLA on the dot. We're slowly trying to change that culture around it, but also trying to improve our own buffers and our own timelines. We're promising them something we can actually deliver. Every single deployment for a while was a firefight because we went from our own data centers, we got all this automation, to running new automation in SoftLayer, a bunch of other stuff. It wasn't working. So we basically threw that. IBM is going to be IBM. Let's ignore it. And we're going to continue being Blue Box. So we overcame the silos of communication, specifically meaning we talk to people. If you're not talking to people, you're not doing your job. That's basically what we're here for. Code is actually a byproduct of what we're doing every day, communicating with people. It makes that job faster. So engineers, operators, product engineers, support engineers, all these things that I listed, all of those people should be talking end to end. I mean, the customer experience at the end of the day is what gets them to pay you money, and that's what you care about, because that's how you survive as a business. Startups get that, IBM sometimes doesn't. So OpenStack, how do we get that? Features from product, they tell us what to do. Sometimes they're right, sometimes they're wrong. We get defects from ops. We have to cut releases quarterly, again, because of compliance. So it's interesting with their team, OpenStack, it's a quarterly release cycle. It's kind of terrible. We're trying to get away from it. Site controller team, I'll tell you about next. We do continuous integration and delivery and deployment, but that's all managed by us. It's a little bit interesting. So they write all their own monitoring checks. You know, they're the ones who know the stack. They have to consume it, and we want them, with their knowledge, telling operations what to do. They do all the logging configurations, making sure this file is getting picked up, all that stuff. We do all of our compliance with server spec, which integrates directly into Sensu and runs hourly. So we have real-time compliance monitoring with our systems. It's actually pretty cool. I'd love to talk about it if anybody wants to later on. And I work for Site Controller. We have to deploy OpenStack fully offline in hostile data centers, meaning we don't actually get an internet connection. So how do you do that? If nobody's ever done that before with any type of software fully offline, it's kind of crazy. So we proxy mirror everything. We provide the pipelines for monitoring, alerting, logging. We don't write all the checks for those, but we make sure that that system's up and running for them. Basically, we're the back-end data center infrastructure that you need anywhere in the world to run your product. We provide the bastions. We sort of spy on everybody. We actually have a tool called TTY Spy that as soon as you SSH in, we force you through it, and every single command, every single output of a command, we record into our own logging infrastructure. It's actually kind of cool. We also provide a single pane of glass for operations. Previously, each data center had its own pane of glass, so operators had a really difficult time understanding correlated events across clusters. Now they can go to single Sensu, a single web page that lists everything per data center, or also roll-ups. It's really cool. Ops, they are IBM. We need the separation here, so they update all the things. The interesting thing is when deployments break, because they always do. Our engineers, we write bugs. I'm sorry. This may be a new concept for some people. I'll be first to admit it. We pull in engineering. This is not a thing that IBM used to do. They would throw code over the wall. Operations would deploy it and run it. Our direct response is no, get an engineer on the phone. If they have to wake them up in the middle of the night because we're deploying, that is a problem. We need to fix that in our process. We need to fix that in our code. So we handle everything like that. Because of our tight SLAs for customers, we consider it an inability to deploy as an SLA problem for that customer. They're tier 1 and 2 for all of our stuff, which is actually really nice. They're godsend. I don't thank them nearly enough for that. But we try to make sure that every time we do alert them, it's got to be actionable. If it isn't actionable on their side, they escalate to us, which then means it's our problem to deal with it. And we probably shouldn't have that alert, so make sure you remove it. We fix the issues together, pairing constantly. We use TMUX like crazy. If you're not pairing with your engineers in TMUX, you probably should be. We're a distributed team. It's fantastic to do that. You want to solve those challenges of communicating knowledge. It's all tribal knowledge, even if it's written in documentation. The context and the understanding is what matters. Ops also has the knowledge of hardware, specifically like Chris Wheeler coming from SoftLayer. We've run into numerous issues because of that, and he has the background. So tools, what do we actually do to get the job done? Slack, GitHub Enterprise, GitHub Ursula, which is our own custom fork. Not necessarily of Ansible specifically, but Ursula is open source. It's all of our roles for deploying OpenStack. You're more than welcome to take a look at it. We're really opinionated on what we do, and I would love to talk about this. I also run Ansible Boston, so let's chat later. We use Ansible like crazy, phone calls, Trello, and I have a bunch of other stuff at the bottom. Number 1,000 on the bottom of the list is IBM Notes, because we have to communicate with people somehow, and that happens to be our email platform. It's still on the list. We do still use it when we have to. But really what I'm trying to say is, above all else, the team matters most. You're all in together, you're all unified in a single goal, and delivering that as a team as a combined unit. That's how you get software shipped. So have fun. Let's ship something great. These are my guys who I manage on Site Controller, and want to chat more? Let's grab coffee. Thank you.
Awesome, Miles. That's excellent. All comes back to people, right, folks? Now we want to call another good contributor to the stand, Tom. Tom's going to be speaking to us. For those of you who don't know Tom, he's with ThreatStack, and his talk is being an engineer in a company that makes tools for engineers. So let him get set up over here. I'm trying to burn time and I have nothing to say. There you go. Do some more clapping. So remember, whatever questions you have, definitely write them down. I handed out some note sheets for our panel talk afterwards. All right.
Let's see. Go find out what happens.
Am I in the way? Let me get my there we go. Look at that. We know how to do stuff. Hey.
How many hops does it take to do a slide?
Yeah, that'll separate it. All right, and it's not showing. All right, now without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Tom.
All right. There we go. Okay, so we start off. I'm Tom McLaughlin. I'm an engineer at ThreatStack. We're a cloud security monitoring platform that helps you answer who did what when in your environment. And so when I saw tonight's topic, I thought, have some great experience at ThreatStack, definitely could probably provide something. So this was my original title, being an engineer in a company that makes a product for engineers. And as I wrote this presentation, I started to kind of narrow in on certain areas. So it became how to use your engineers to market and sell. Woo! That's right, thank you. So how do I put you into a threat stack today? If anyone doesn't know, that is Joe Isuzu, the infamous 80s car salesman. And I just want you all to know, no, I do not lie when I'm trying to sell to you. Thought more people would know who Joe Isuzu was, but fine. So why does ThreatStack use its engineers? First off, it helps us to sell. Second, as a startup, we sometimes have gaps. We have knowledge gaps, we have skill gaps, etc. And something that even if you're not in an organization that sells a product that you consume, recruiting. Okay, we all have to actually sell our company to get people we want to work with to work with us. So let's start with a problem many organizations face. Engineering is disconnected from sales and marketing and vice versa. We don't talk to each other. We don't know what problems each other is having. And so why is that? Yep, good, it's animating. So they're different from us, okay? They're just so different from us. These people are not from the engineering gene pool. Okay, so they're loud, they're always talking, for some reason they're playing sports in the office and I can't understand it. They're just frustrated. They don't know what an AWS security group is. They ask all these questions. I forgot I have this. So here's some comments from that particular YouTube video, presumably by engineers. This is also why you should not read the comments. It's true that salespeople are soulless robots, to which somebody corrected them, mindless robots. These people are poor salespeople, idiot and shit at their jobs. I knew salespeople who could come into your office and try to sell you a great deal, but you would end up leaving with a more expensive, less efficient product because they made you want it. The skill of those people, I can honestly say, is why Apple and that bendable iPhone, a salesman probably convinced him to buy the material for it. Yeah, there's a lot of dislike for sales people. But guess what? They need to be different. Their job requires them to talk to countless people that you or I might typically avoid. They have to talk to your unlikable coworker, okay? They can't just sit there and say, I don't want to talk to you. They need to talk to them to actually make a sale. They need to do all this sort of stuff in order to survive in their career. Again, skills that we can kind of get away with kind of neglecting a little bit. Why else is engineering, disconnected from marketing and sales? They're the favorites, real or perceived. They make the money. They're the ones that are actually, bringing money in. That's the people that, they always have the sales party at the end of the quarter or something when they hit their numbers, and we're just kind of like, all right, fine, we got pizza. Again, us on the other hand, we're not. We're too busy sitting in the background, just burning it all away, Playing favorites in a company is bad. Disliking our personal differences and playing to favorites leads to resentment and the dreaded S word. Who knows what the S word is? Silos. Thank you. We've been DevOpsing so hard to tear down these silos. That's why we're here. Look at that, Dev and Ops. And this is where we ended up. DevOps, maybe even InfoSec in one silo, and then marketing, sales, and support still in their own other silos. But so what? What do marketing, sales, and support actually have to do with me? Remember that turd you shipped to production? And don't lie, we've all done it. We've all shipped things that we were not particularly proud of. Someone needs to polish it, okay? Searching for polished turd on Google image search was very fun. So we need to expand our empathy outside of engineering. You think your job is hard, guess what? Their job is too. So how do we use our engineers at ThreatStack in order to sell effectively and market effectively? This is our ThreatStack operations team. There's Pete, Apollo, Pat, me. This is who we sell to. You can see there's a lot of similarities there. Internally, we're not just engineers. We're also the customer that we're trying to sell to. This is what's called a marketing funnel. Anyone know what a marketing funnel is? Yes. It's a typical marketing funnel. You want to attract people, you want to convert them, you want to nurture them along, and you want to close the deal with a sale, and then you want to continue delighting them so they remain a customer. TOFU, top of funnel. It's the top of the funnel where we attract new customers and when your engineers can actually be the most effective. So how do we do this? Social media thought leaders. We work on providing awareness through social media. What is a thought leader? Because it's in my bio for this. It is someone who regularly provides opinions to the point that they think their opinions actually matter. So we work hard at ThreatStack to promote our engineers. There's Sam talking at VelocityConf. There is Pete who is doing a webinar today. And there's me at the bottom being retweeted, that I'm speaking here tonight.
Did you retweet that yourself?
I no longer have access to the company Twitter account. I used to. This is a screenshot from the InfoSec channel on Hangouts. And here, someone's asking, who here has experience with ThreatStack? And if you start going through the list, you see Pete Cheslock is there. And as a Twitter follower, I fully endorse him. You should see some of the food pics he posts. Okay, we actually had people following us on social media and recommending us to other customers. They don't even use our product. They literally just know who we are. They've seen us talk. They've heard us talk. And they're like, yeah, they're probably okay. Next up, us engineers, we promote ThreatStack. We can actually have a noticeable impact on our website visits. I'm not allowed to give you actual numbers, but I can tell you, we actually did some testing with URL tracking, and we found out that individual people, through their Twitter usage, were actually able to make a noticeable dent on the amount of people visiting our website. We are also our marketing content creators. Our engineers blog a lot. We regularly have customers tell us that they found out about us by reading our blog. They may even have particular pieces. They said, you know what? I read something of yours, and that actually really hit home for me. I had a piece on doing Duo 2FA, and people are actually citing it, saying, yeah, you know what? We're actually looking at replacing SMS 2FA. That was actually a really good blog series for us to follow. We are also effective in our writing because we are customers as well. We have very similar interests. There is part 1 of that series. We regularly send our engineers to events. If you saw us at DevOps Days Boston, if you went, I was the one walking around handing out as many Threat Stack t-shirts as I possibly could. And socks too. Our threat socks, so you can be SOX compliant. The way we actually do this very often is we pair our engineers with a sales or marketing person. So a sales and marketing person is able to kind of bring people into the booth, and then as the conversation becomes more technical and so forth, they will bring us over, and we're happy to actually talk with a prospect. We did the same thing with Sam for recruiting. Hi, Sam. Yep. You would usually see us at events. You would see her doing recruiting and me to be able to talk more about the company, more about the platform. We speak at conferences and meetups, as I'm doing right now. Again, Sam is talking at VelocityConf, and I'm here. And we will even sometimes reach out on sales behalf. So this was actually today. Do you know this person? So it's like, all right, fine, what am I going to do? I'll message them, just say, hey, sales is actually thinking of reaching out to you. Let's just get down to this really quickly. What are you doing now? What's on your roadmap? What do you have time for? And if you're not interested, no problem. I just do some soft sell work, and it's very easy for me to be able to say, okay, this person is ready, they'd like to talk to us, or this person won't be ready for another 6 months. They just don't have the time, etc. So how do we effectively actually get our engineers to do more than just engineering? Why do I write blog posts? This is my motivation. Scotch. We give gift cards for every blog we get published, and I use those gift cards to buy myself a present of nice scotch, okay? I write as much as possible for this, okay? That provides for my weekend. We provide help. Marketing provides us help. This is Bob. Bob is amazing. Bob is a content editor. You know what's great? English isn't always our most proficient language as engineers. That's just unfortunate. You want to have people write about Scala, ask them to talk about, writing English, it's a problem. We facilitate knowledge transfers on a regular basis, okay? Every Monday is lunch and learn. For us to have lunch on the company, we need to actually have a learn. So a free burrito is actually a good reason for someone to get up in front of the company and teach people things. We talk to our salespeople in a language that they understand. We speak English and not code to them. I don't understand AWS security groups. I don't get frustrated by that. I sit down with them and say, okay, let me explain this in a way that you can understand so that when you're talking to someone like me on the phone or out in public and so forth, you can have a knowledgeable conversation and you can feel confident when you're talking to this engineer. Okay, what can you get out of this? What can your company do in order to help its employees, particularly its engineers, sell better? Help us with an elevator pitch, okay? Help us explain what the company does. I've worked for a company where I could not explain what our company did without about like 10 or 15 sentences, okay? That makes it really awkward. You wanna know what Threat Stack does? Cloud security monitoring platform that focuses on security, compliance, and operational efficiency. We help you know who did what, where, and when, etc. Help us to write better. I run into that before. English isn't necessarily our most proficient language all the time. A lot of us want to communicate. We have a hard time communicating. It's a skill that we haven't had to do a lot since we left college. And even in college, some of us did not write exactly a lot. Help us to promote the company, okay? Tweeting is easy. Effective tweeting is actually hard. It really is. Have marketing teach your engineers when to tweet. how to formulate, what you're trying to talk about. How do you engage strangers so that they actually find you interesting and want to keep listening to you? And finally, instill in all of us a shared sense, a sense of shared purpose, okay? Teamwork makes the dream work. And finally, I had to put this one in, just because it's marketing. You have all just been marketed to. I've hopefully provided you with interesting and useful content, and at the same time expanded our brand awareness. Thank you.
Tom, awesome. Definitely highly suggest talking to Tom afterwards, on some of the things they do. Because Stack is phenomenal at the ground marketing campaign, right? Guerrilla marketing and what they've done within the community is ridiculous. Hey, so right now we're going to take a 15-minute break. So, I suggest either hit in the bathrooms, grab yourself some food, grab another drink, start to have some conversations, and then we're going to get started with the next talk after 15 minutes, all right? So definitely enjoy, all right? Thank you.
All right, pause the speak.
Hi, my name's
Thank you.
Great meeting you. Thank you. All right. Hopefully you guys got your refreshments. If we can start to break up the side chatter, we want to get this started ASAP. I want to introduce you to our next speaker, Mr. Rob Park will be speaking today. It's going to be from silos to circles, the Venn diagram. So this is a great talk that we wanted to get everybody in. So if you guys from the back can bring it up forward, we're going to get this kicked off. That way we're going to be able to have plenty of time for Q&A with our 5 speakers. And then also Acquia is offered to do a tour for anyone interested in wanting to see the facility further, all right? So without further ado, Mr. Rob Park.
Thank you, and thanks to Steve for the clicker, because my clicker died this morning. And also, yeah, thanks for the threat stack talk, so I'm not the only startup on the lineup. So this is just going to be a bit of an experience report, kind of related to some of the things that we're doing at our company. So Intent Media is a travel-based ad network based in New York City. I actually work remotely most of the time, but we're about 7 teams of engineers, so we split them up pretty small, but we're 30+ software creators. I'll mention that in a minute. So this is kind of the, as we've seen already, the often used metaphor of kind of old school, pre-agile, pre-DevOps way to operate, or just the way that some people still have to operate. We had this structure at Intent Media till about 2 years ago, maybe a year and a half ago. And now, so we kind of tried to embrace this of trying to integrate the three major engineering roles, I guess, for the most part. And this is basically what we moved to, but we really kind of tried to crank it up another level, like turn the dial up to 11. So we actually got rid of the tech ops team, so we have no tech ops team. Ironically, I am the head of technical operations, but actually there is no team. And we actually have no QA team anymore, and beyond that, we got rid of even the titles. Like, there is no operations engineer or tech ops engineer anymore. There's no QA engineers. So basically the mantra is if you build it, you run it. Unfortunately, you also might inherit it. So that is sort of I guess, leads to some confusion as to who supports this service, and trying to find the person who supports that service. And so that's one thing where we definitely are still trying to improve our communication level there. But basically the idea of integrating these things closer was to get just tighter feedback loops and shortened communication paths. And for the most part, honestly, it really has worked. And we've seen a lot of evidence internally where it's really worked really well for us. So one other thing that's a little bit tricky to deal with when you have no, say, central operations team or anything like that is how do you manage centralized infrastructure? And so basically we're trying to outsource everything that we can. So I won't go down the no-ops path because it's obviously not no-ops, but the teams basically manage their own infrastructure, and where they don't manage their infrastructure is because we have a vendor that manages our infrastructure. So this is kind of how I really look at the communication paths now, is that we have these 7 teams, and it's really much more about, it's not about getting ops to talk to devs, it's really about getting the teams to be able to communicate with one another, and being able to really enable that, because they really have to, different teams own their services, and so now we're moving to more of an ownership model, instead of having this monolithic model where everything is. We do use, for communication in this style, we do use a lot of email, but honestly in tech we tend to move away from email for the most part. We use a lot of Google Groups to manage getting lists, and so you get notifications through Google Groups. We have Confluence, which is where you can of course opt in to whether or not you want to watch this or not. But then of course we have Slack, and Slack is basically our main channel of operation, especially being remote a lot of the time. But even for people who live in New York and work in New York, there's always somebody that's remote. Actually, all of our conference rooms are also very friendly, remote friendly. They all have good mic setups, good camera setups, and they have there's like a huge TV in every single conference room, so that works out really well. Although I don't know of anybody that uses tmux at our company, because it's a lot of Java. So. Let's see, so teams kind of, again, they're very free to free to use whatever tools they want, so we don't necessarily dictate there's no like central Jira. Some teams use, well, a bunch of teams use different tools to manage their stories or their tickets or whatever. We don't actually run into, one like interesting thing to me is that we don't really run into too much cross-team dependency relationship problems where where's this, or I'm waiting on this particular ticket, because really even if my team is working in Clubhouse, I can easily follow a Pivotal's tracker story just as well. So let's see. So we kind of as a service whatever we can, and we definitely just kind of go for whatever the team wants to go with. We do have like a monthly sort of tech ops oriented cross squad meeting to try and share across teams what things are working and what things aren't, and where we're looking for other new ways of doing things. But honestly, those aren't really all that exciting. So the cross team meetings aren't necessarily the best solution for us. we get a lot more of that. You can really leverage a lot of that information just by monitoring Slack and looking at different channels at different times. And again, that's an opt-in thing, right? So we have a ton of channels. Actually, it's very common for the pattern seems to be that teams will all have their own channel, and they'll also have their own alerts channel to keep the noise separate from the discussion. And people from other teams will often just drop in. They'll drop in for a particular discussion and then drop back out. And then there's some people like me that just tend to lurk on all of these channels and drop in on occasion. I also wanted to mention, like, to me, this is kind of like the communication path that follows with Conway's Law. We definitely started as a more monolithic organization, and we definitely had a very monolithic code base. And over time, especially having moved to individual teams and this more of an individual ownership type approach and trying to divvy up like what the ownerships are, that we've broken a ton of things out of the monolithic repo into their own individual repos. And of course, new services that come up, they'll have their own database, they'll have their own repo, they'll have their own deployment scheme, and their own built pipelines and all of that. Some of the other communication things that we do tend to leverage, like I mentioned, cross-team meetings, although those tend to have kind of limited success, so we try and keep them kind of quick and tidy if we can. Mob programming has been a kind of a newer interest with a lot of the several teams, and so several teams where they'll be, basically this is great for intra-team communication, but also they tend to be really open about it. So it's really easy as someone who's not on a given team to just drop in and sit in with a different team's mob for the afternoon and get a good feel for like how the other team works and also just get a feel for what they're working on. We also do learning reviews. We've been trying to do these for about the last year. Certainly around incidents, but we also do them around non-incidents. So this is kind of the, I guess, newer form of the post-mortem, blameless post-mortem type of thing. And these are scheduled ad hoc, but they definitely have a very clear agenda. We're still trying to figure out like sort of the best ways to conduct them, and certainly the best ways to really make sure we follow up on the remediations that come out of them. But they seem to really encourage cross-team communication and get knowledge of the way the different things work around the organization. So that's been really helpful. What's that?
I know the words. I have some idea what it could be, but can you tell me what it really is? The practical example how a learning review looks like?
So have you heard of blameless postmortems? Or we can bring it to the Q&A, I guess, if you want.
Yeah, Q&A.
But basically, it's like Dave. If you look up Dave Zwiebeck and like blameless postmortem or learning review, you'll find it. Yeah, so that's about it, I guess. I tried to keep it tidy. And so yes, we are hiring, especially if you're interested in moving to New York. And if you want to check out our space, we're actually hosting an open spaces conference that tends to be. So it's open spaces, but the topics tend to revolve around DevOps and continuous integration, continuous delivery, and other things like that. And so we're hosting that at our office. It's a free conference in the middle of October. So check that out.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Rob. And definitely, if you go onto our Slack channel, Boston DevOps, we'll be sending that out. You'll be able to get all of the links and also the invite to visit Rob's open spaces. All right, now for our last speaker, I want to introduce you all to Laura Stone, who I introduced earlier as our co-organizer here. So she's actually an engineer with Veracode, and she's going to talk about selling collaboration, because this is a situation we're trying to get everybody to be working together, right? But a lot of the times, it's to what end and to what motivation. So that's going to be one of the key discussions that need to be discussed.
I require assistance.
Okay. She requires assistance.
I want it to be both on screen and online.
Oh, just change your.
Thank God for Anastas. Look at him. He's about to bang it out right now. Hey, listen, sorry. Let me get out of the way here. definitely want to have write down questions that you guys have for each of their speakers, right? Because the value of this meetup is going to come in the discussion period when we have the panel up afterwards. So as we get this set up, I want to make sure, I just want to reiterate that. And then after the Q&A, I'm going to introduce James and Jeannie. Jeannie, if you can raise your hand right there from Acquia. Would like to invite you to do a tour of the facility so you can kind of see what goes on here at Acquia, to get a better understanding and a feel for the environment and also the culture of the place. And radio silence is bad, huh? So Nick, how are you doing over there? We have Nick up from Rhode Island. Give a shout out for coming up. Rhode Island in the house. Oh, also one thing I wanted to introduce as well. Now, if for any organizations, if you guys are looking to be hiring, we want to put some kind of board together where we try to connect hiring with candidates. So we'll try to do something like that in the near future, and this is going to be completely collaborative. So as an organization, if you have a certain need, we utilize the jobs on Slack, but that's not really working for us. So I would love to get some of your ideas on how we can be doing this better to kind of be, the Match.com of DevOps and organizations. Did I say enough? Are we good? We're good. All right. Without further ado, we got Laura Stone.
Thank you. Testing. Okay.
All right.
Like this says, I'm going to talk about selling collaboration and some ways that I did that. So the agenda is going to be, I'm going to talk about myself very briefly so that you know who I am and why I might be talking about this. We're going to go over some organizational topologies and the problems that arise from them, potentially. Solutions that I attempted, the outcomes from those, and then hopefully get some time for lessons learned and then questions, which I guess everybody's going to come up and do questions. So who am I? I right now am a software engineer at Veracode. They're a security company, a software security company that basically can scan code or your running application for security vulnerabilities. As I alluded to before, I've been an active member of DevOps, or Boston DevOps, since 2014. I also love hiking, and I figured I should say something personal, but didn't really know what else to say. So there you have it. So let's talk about some organizational topologies. This is usually a picture of what I think like the startup world looks like. So you have development tasks, you have operations tasks. They're happening more or less in concert by one team. And this works really well if you have one organization centered around a specific product or service. However, as we know, this doesn't scale very well as your company grows, as you have multiple products, multiple services. So often this evolves into what I call the old world. This is the classic throw it over the wall picture that people talk about when they also show like the corn silos. I don't think I have to talk that much about this. So something that my team did is we decided to embark on a new world. And I don't know if folks are familiar with DevOpsTopologies.com, but I literally ripped these, yes, one. So I literally ripped these off of this, and it's really cool. I recommend checking that website out. So this is the topology that we decided to try. And what it basically is ops operates as infrastructure as a service, and then there is a smaller subset within the development team doing quote-unquote DevOps. And what that means is that they're focused around sort of operational features, metrics, monitoring, server provisioning, and other stuff like that. And they also serve as the primary point of contact for the operations team. This fit really well with what my team was trying to do. We were trying to take a monolithic application, split it up into microservices, and at the same time move from our data center to AWS. The team was me, the DevOps, as well as an architect, several developers, and a QA resource. So we were working in this new world for a while, and we were like, oh my God, this is so much better. Someone exists to ensure smooth communication with the operations team. Someone internal to the team can provide some expertise around operational stuff, so we don't even need to go to the operations team all the time. And really this led to just like less waiting for external dependencies in general. However, we noticed that there was still some pain associated with the change. We noticed that development efforts were occurring in silos, so our knowledge was poorly distributed. I was basically the only one who had any understanding of our infrastructure whatsoever. Our stories that we were supposedly agile, doing Scrum, moving through sprints, they lacked a clear definition of done. Basically, they weren't really stories, they were more tickets. You get some work, you do it, you move it to done. And that done often meant feature complete. It didn't mean that we took infrastructure or deployment or anything into account. Coincidentally, we didn't have a deployment pipeline. And then also we were engaging in what I would say would be ceremonial Scrum. So all of this led up to our timeline that just kept extending. And I thought about this and I thought, well, you know, it seems like maybe there are some collaboration problems happening here. So I said, I really want to solve this. I want to make our team not just good, but really, really amazing. And so I came up with this initial solution. And I said, I'm going to sell extreme programming to my team and to my organization because I think it's going to make a really big difference. So what did I do? I said, okay, I'm going to write a wiki article about it. I'm going to write the most persuasive, most well-written wiki article, and I'm going to send it out to everybody, and they're going to read it, and they're going to think, oh my God, we have to do this. So just a raise of hands, who here think that this worked? Yeah, exactly. It didn't work at all, right? You know, I got a few pats on the back of like, wow, this was really well written. This is a lot for me to chew on. But nothing happened. So what were the problems with that? First and foremost, I did it by myself. I was like, cool, I'm going to write this. I know what's best. I'm just going to do it. Second, it was an information overload, right? People were like, wow, this is great, but I'm really overwhelmed by everything you just told me. And in addition to the information overload, there were no action items. There was no like, so now we do step A and then step B. But most importantly, I wasn't really considering my audience. So then I took a step back and I said, so what type of messaging resonates at my organization? And after doing some digging, I found maturity models. So I don't know if people here, raise of hands who here knows what a maturity model is, like at the basic. Okay, so there's some up, some down. But basically, it's a business assessment tool that usually has a fixed number of maturity steps or levels that are associated with certain characteristics. So basically, when you move across, either from left or to right, you're moving across different stages of IM or maturity. So I was like, okay, I have this idea for the value delivery maturity model. I thought that like the business people would just love the name of that, so that's why I named it that way. But as you can see, there are four main parts: business, technology, process, and people. And I want to give a shout out to Amin, because some of this was very much inspired by your talk that you gave at DevOps Boston, so thank you. And then at the base level, you know, it has different stages that you move through. In addition to this, each section can have various subsections. So within business, you might have something like customer experience or whatever you decide is right for your organization, your team. But to give an example about how this might work is to take the idea of the team having poorly distributed knowledge. Well, maybe in the process section, I have a knowledge distribution subsection where the base part of this model is that the team documents what each team member knows. Then an intermediate place on the model might be that the team has identified where there are single points of failure, and then works to retroactively address these by distributing knowledge. And then in the advanced column, it might be something like the team uses techniques to proactively distribute knowledge, such as pair programming, code reviews, like team code reviews, mob programming, stuff like that. To give another example that doesn't just have to do with internal to development coordination, you could have something around the team definition of done being inconsistent that has to do with like the business section and a subsection of customer experience. So that could be centered around, well, let's say the base is that, you know, the customer experience is entirely absent or inconsistent. The intermediate is that the team makes sure that they have a clear definition of done that includes user experience, such that there's user experience included in that. And then the advanced might be something like having an on-site customer with an embedded UX resource within your team to ensure that. So creating this model, how did this happen? The first thing I did was I made sure I didn't do it by myself like the last time. So I had this idea, and then I had a conversation with a coworker who was very pro-extreme programming. And I said, hey, I'd really love to do this with you. What are your thoughts? He said, great. We individually created Excel documents and then had a meeting where we merged them together. And that was our original wiki page. Wiki page again, but you know, maturity model wiki page, so it's more effective. That page went through multiple revisions, and eventually there was so much content that it was split into multiple pages. So there was an overview, then a playbook which had more detailed information for folks that wanted to dig deeper, as well as an entire page dedicated to metrics around, okay, how are we going to measure these different parts of the model and make sure that this model is effective? And then lastly, to have an entire page dedicated to resources. So books, articles, videos, anything that someone could learn about more for a particular section or subsection. So in addition to this, I thought it was really important to get constant feedback. So I did that from both internal to the engineering department, my management manager, as well as making sure I stepped outside of engineering, talking to product management, talking to user experience, talking to sales operations, saying, hey, this is what I think for these things, and this is how I feel your expertise could supplement the stuff I already have. And then I also added something called Keystone Habits, which if people have questions about that, we can talk about it. So what were the outcomes? The reception to this maturity model was positive all the way up the management chain. I work at an organization that's slightly larger, so there is a management chain, and there was positive reception all the way up. Additionally, I was given permission to pilot the program with my current team, and I've already seen that there's an increased focus on measurement, so making sure we're measuring the right things and making sure we're measuring them right, and then also an increased focus on Agile. So what were the lessons that I learned? First, don't wait. Don't wait for your company to say, hey, here's this problem, can you solve it? Be proactive. Don't wait for the right words. Don't wait for the right time. Just try stuff out. Second, consider your context. A wiki page that was lots of content, but not a maturity model, was not the right content for my context. Also, involve other people, particularly if you can find sponsors, or ideally multiple sponsors. These people can help elevate what you want to do at a higher level than you have access to. Also, walk the road by walking. So I made a model to help with collaboration by collaborating, right? And then also, I wasn't afraid to experiment and say, okay, well, is this going to work? If not, okay, we'll try something else. And lastly, the idea of building success. So taking something to a coworker, getting their feedback, feeling positive, feeling like that was a win, and taking that to build continued success. So that's all I have. We'll now have time for questions and feedback, and you can contact me.
Laura, that was amazing. That was amazing. So what we're going to do right now is, if we can get all of our speakers up here, we're going to set these chairs up because we definitely want to get to Q&A. And like I said, phenomenal presentations. Thank you very much to all of our lightning talks. The value for you, our attendees, is in the Q&A. All right. So if you guys, we're going to give it about 3 minutes, get it set up, and then we wanted to get questions answered, and that way we can, start this thing and kick it off. All right. So just a heads up, for anybody who has questions, we are on wired mics, so the mic's not going out there. So if you have a question, just bring yourself closer to the podium. That way everybody will be able to hear you. And for our presenters, if you just can repeat the question that is asked when you're answering, that way so everyone has an idea as to what you guys are talking about. All right? All right. So without further ado, questions?
There you go.
I can start. I have a question for Rob, actually. Yes. So you were mentioning let teams use the tools they want to kind of perform. I'm very pro that model. I'm finding it hard to do with such a large organization because management wants everybody under the same thing. But for the only thing I care about is speed. So, how would you advise me to kind of approach that in a human way?
So I think, so one of the, well, so it's a little tricky for me to point to my own. What's that? I have to eat the mic? Yeah. Oh, geez. Okay. I did not know that. So I can't really just point you straight to my case, I think. I mean, this is partially having not worked at Netflix, but partially modeled after the freedom and responsibility type of mantra that they tend to espouse. So, so there's that, so that it can actually scale and it can work at a larger scale, because we've seen other companies do that. I think the other thing is having this experimentation increases just diversity of ideas, and I think the diversity of ideas is important for actually innovating. And I don't know, generally people want to innovate, and companies want to innovate, but they often don't know how or don't because they have something that's making money and they don't want to break it.
That's what scares me, is if they force a single model, are they going to diminish a brilliant idea that's way down the chain that they're not aware of?
Right, and in my case, especially being smaller, I'm basically just leveraging the same idea of don't pre-optimize, right? Don't try and pre-optimize too early and sort of shut things down. So.
I've got a follow-up, actually. Jeff reminded me of something I wanted to ask Rob, and that is, do you, sorry guys.
No,
there'll be more
don't
questions.
apologize to them.
How do you establish some kind of common API that different teams should follow? And by API I mean like standards, because when one team is using Ansible and another one is making their own, cooking up their own configuration management or making their own software while some other teams are using industry standards, like how does that work? Because I can see it being very disruptive and then hard to manage, creating technical debt and all the regular issues of sort of just separate.
So trying to digest the question. So is the question mostly just how do you manage having a
freedom,
diverse?
Freedom is dangerous sometimes.
Especially from a cost perspective. When I looked at the model of what tools you were using, the first thing that came to my mind was, wow, who's responsible for the budget on?
Wow.
Well, actually,
these guys have some great context.
That could work out for the best, because often GitHub Enterprise, like if you use like really small team sizes, then it's really cheap.
Yes.
And they get you on the larger ones, right?
So the first question, I believe, is like, how do you manage the diversity of tools and not sort of, I don't know, shoot yourself in the foot, or just because you have this diverse array of things that people are using. Honestly, the only place that this gets a little bit tricky is when we go and change the teams. So when we have teams that are in place and they're managing their own stuff, so they know what things that they have, and they know how to manage those things. When we say dissolve a team or we combine a couple of teams, now we have to merge a few things together. We've done some of that, and we haven't actually seen any problems with this. So this is just kind of back to I'm trying not to pre-optimize. I'm trying to just sort of let things go. We do use, I guess Ansible and Terraform tend to be the two ways that we provision things right now. Except for Bash. I mean, we have a pile of Bash. So that it just doesn't really get in the way.
But what I mean is, do you have some common standards that help create these APIs that are more common, so that so it's easier to use these different tools?
So sorry. So the question is do we have some common API or some common base of stuff? And I guess my initial reaction is no, but that's not entirely true, because we do have, for example, we have one team that runs a DCOS cluster, and they definitely have people running services or teams running services on that cluster, which isn't their cluster. And so that's a kind of common infrastructure piece that they own and manage. But others are really responsible for monitoring and paying attention to their services if they're running in there. And they just realize that they're dependent on like that cluster being operational and knowing how to get to it. So there are some things that do get leveraged across teams, and they do use like common things, and we certainly everyone has access to all of the repos. I guess if there was one kind of gold standard that we're not 100% subscribed to, meaning that we definitely have some debt in places, but the one standard would be is that everything should be kind of coded infrastructure. Like we shouldn't just have like loose infrastructure running around with basically no code behind it and no test behind the code. So that's kind of the standard that we shoot for, but it's always a work in progress. On the cost question, so I'm basically responsible for keeping track of the cost, but I do tend to push that down to the teams as well. And right now, a lot of this is, again, don't pre-optimize, look at the cost and see what happens. And so for example, right now, we don't like host our own, for Terraform specifically, we actually are using Atlas, which is the HashiCorp product, and I'm expecting that cost to actually get high. And when it does, then we'll deal with it. But right now, it hasn't been high at all. So it just hasn't been a problem, and it's actually been a nice tool to use. So we definitely like tools, especially. We prefer vendors that scale with us. So for example, we've moved a bunch of our infrastructure in AWS to serverless, like using Kinesis streams to process clicks, and then using Lambdas to pull things off of those. And the nice thing there is that we can be as low as, say, 500 clicks a minute in the low period of the day, and go up as high as like 3,000-4,000 clicks a minute during the day, and we don't have to put together a ton of infrastructure to scale that. So we're really trying to leverage our vendors as best we can, and get pricing models that scale, basically with the scale.
So one of the things that I'm hearing here is that traditionally there's been this idea that we need to sort of like control and standardize to optimize costs, to minimize switching costs if people switch between teams, which is somewhat of an optimizing for the non-standard case, perhaps. And part of what I'm hearing from Rob is that let's just like steer and react and sort of go with the flow of it. And one of the essential elements there, if you look at the control model, it's typically been also, we need this control because we're siloing all these groups off. But if you have the collaboration that everybody's talking about, you have this ability to, what I've found a lot of the time is that best practices tend to sort of converge and sort of weave around each other anyway, because people are like, oh, these guys are really effective. Let's do what they're doing, or let's learn what they're learning. And if you sort of steer it by outcomes rather than telling people how to do it, and you have the collaboration to get that cross-pollination, it works better. And I'm wondering, with each of the talks, like some of this goes, there's a certain amount of that has to be done within the framework of whatever the organization's maturity is. There's a certain amount of that has to do with the way people talk to each other and collaborate with each other and break down the silos. And I'm wondering, it seems like there's almost a spectrum between the speakers of like this range of degree of control versus free form, it'll work out anyway. And I'm wondering what each of you sort of think about that within the context of your talks.
Yeah, like Jeff,
I believe I'm done.
Are we perfectly equidistant from each other? To present that idea.
I think to be all the way on the side, like IBM's got you by a couple of people.
Yeah, started with Blue Box.
Boy. So it's interesting for us because we view ourselves still as not necessarily a startup. We can't call ourselves that anymore, but we try to be the nimble infrastructure where we motivate ourselves based on outcomes. We feel that the only way to change IBM, because we already lost at this when coming in, by telling them, hey, this is how we do things and how we're awesome, and they said, we don't care. Okay, so now it is all outcome based. Basically, we motivate ourselves and our teams by delivering the best thing possible while still generally enjoying ourselves and everything we do deliver to showcase what is possible. Because I think that's the biggest thing that we run up against is we employ a lot of engineers, obviously. They generally don't come to events like this. They don't talk. They're very much in the bubble, even within their own teams or within the company if they do get out of it. Whereas most of our engineering at Blue Box is constantly trying to find the outcomes and the decisions and impact that other people are doing. Basically, we like to learn from other people and not just having to learn from ourselves. That's the Stark approach. So who is next on your continuum then? Because I think you have a better perspective than I do.
Well, I think we had different samples. You know,
Okay.
like I think there's elements, for example, of what Laura said about maturity in this as
Yeah,
well.
going to Laura and then to Jeff, I think would be interesting.
Sure. So to clarify too, I think part of not showing what my and the people that I worked with, the model that we put together is that I feel like it is organization specific, just like first and foremost. But I also noted that, will note that a lot of the advanced column for the sections and subsections was essentially different ways of saying continuous improvement. So it's a model, it's a framework, but it's not a prescriptive one. And so that's sort of where I fall with that.
Sounds like that.
He's the smallest, so he's got to go last.
So you mentioned tickets and why we do a ticket for everything. We're growing so fast that we need a quantifiable measurement of the work that the team's doing. And to follow that method, we would hire 5,000 people and it would work, and then we'd have 4,000 of them standing around doing nothing after a year. So we found that there's the theory of constraints basically says there's always going to be something. The ticketing system can't be the constraint. It has to be, something else there to be the constraint, whether it's the code or the deployment of that nature. So we have our own in-house built ticketing system for the ease of click a button, here's your ticket. Click a button, here's your ticket. It, restfully pass information back and forth, but we have to have the visual transparency to see what people are doing to know how many people we have to hire before Cyber Monday.
Nobody wants to talk about sales and marketing.
Well, no, I actually have a question for Tom, because the model that you have set up, and honestly, like I've been following ThreatStack for a while, and for engineers, it's unbelievable in my mind how you guys reach into other areas. Internally, what are you looking for? Because first off, to find DevOps engineers is difficult enough. But to find the type of personality traits that you guys look for to be able to get out there and be outward spoken, how are you guys doing that? Or is there a system internally at ThreatStack that you're I'm curious. It's one of those things, like first outward engineers in the world we're in. It's like an oxymoron. So how are you guys doing this, and how are you going to scale from this point on?
So how do we recruit engineers at ThreatStack? We sometimes like to call it the long con. We have people that we know that we've met, and we've cultivated relationships with people literally for years. So it's not uncommon for us to, two of us came in, and it was like we were known to the organization a year or two earlier. And it's like, okay, and we're just gonna, and so people basically waited for us to actually be free. And then, okay, once you're free, we're gonna try and snatch you up, and we're gonna try and get you to work here. But it's a matter of just cultivating that long list and meeting as many people as possible and saying, all right, when this person starts getting a little antsy in their current job, once they've cashed out from like IBM or something like that, let's talk to them about a position. It's a long process. It's very hard to just hire somebody on the spot. So that's, again, we try and keep a large stable of people that we know and that we can bring into the organization when they're ready.
So a follow-up question quickly. Do you have like, would you consider ThreatStack has a great model for teaching and learning, bringing engineers who maybe don't have these skill sets, but they can come in and not only advance their engineering expertise, but also their interpersonal to be able to get into sales and marketing? Is that available at ThreatStack?
We could probably do a better job formalizing it. No, it's true. I mean, we have a few people that have that are just, used to doing this sort of stuff, used to being out public and speaking, that have kind of just like laid the groundwork and set the way and set the example for other people to follow. But yeah, we could actually, I think, do a slightly better job. I think actually one of the things I've pushed marketing for is, like, have a writing class. I would literally love a writing class. Like, once, once every 6 months, just get a few of us and just like help us understand how to better write, and so that we can produce better content. Something we're going to do soon is our business development reps. We need to have them better able to understand like how to use social media to make new contacts. That's going to be me standing in front of a bunch of BDRs and going through a nice presentation of teaching them how do you understand, how do you use this tool effectively. But nothing so much formally. We're not particularly big, but hopefully over time we'll be able to have some nice blog post about how we're a presentation culture or something like that, where we expect engineers to do that. I don't know if that's what we're gonna do, but maybe that is something we can do as we mature.
So I also have a follow-up question. That at the risk of turning this into something about staffing and recruiting, which maybe we should have an entirely separate event about. Anyway, if you are playing this quote-unquote long con and basically recruiting people that what steps do you then take to to ward off the impulse to hire a very homogenous group of people?
How do we, again, how do we end, oh, you already announced it because you were talking into it. I will admit that is an issue. I go out to a number of events. I think a fair amount of people see me out at a various number of events. It's hard. It is tremendously hard. I tried with the Women in Infrastructure group.
Nobody's here.
Tom's just poison here. He's like planting seeds.
So I tried with them. That was actually a dead end. Like, this was a group that I reached out to, and I'm like, hey, here, so forth. There are other organizations in the city. So as Gwen was pointing out, Smarter in the City, it's a non-equity startup accelerator that's serving like underserved areas of Boston. I'll be volunteering there on a regular basis. There's Resilient Coders. That's another organization you can get involved with. So it's a matter of us, so probably pretty much breaking out of the usual like infrastructure and development groups and looking for these other ones that do exist out there. But yes, you have to work a little bit, and you have to make sure that you're going to these sort of events to find people.
Thank you.
Over here, Nick, real quick.
Yeah. So I want to come back to the question of sort of team composition. I mean, we had two diametrically opposed positions put from the platform. Laura spoke about an anti-pattern that I've used myself several times of developing a specific DevOps team. I think in certain infrastructure it has its place where you're trying to basically advocate a DevOps position between two teams. And then INET Media spoke about doing away with Ops and QA altogether. And the speaker avoided the term no ops, which Netflix caused a shitstorm over when they introduced it. I think one of the reasons why Netflix caused a shitstorm is because they have probably one of the biggest operations teams of any tech company, but they put them under development. But I think the question is, how do you like if you do away with these various teams and integrate everyone into one big thing, there's still responsibilities and there's still technical skills involved. So how do you ensure that you, because to my mind, I mean, I was a late adopter of the term DevOps because I'm at 30 years since I've been. I was like, what the hell is all this DevOps about? I've been going into places and kicking down walls for years, and I've been, I don't need all this shit about, collaboration, company art and all this, we don't need this, we just go in and kick down walls. So I was a late adopter of the term DevOps, and now it's become a thing, no one can avoid it. But it needs to be defined what it actually means, because it certainly doesn't mean no office. It certainly doesn't mean doing away with operational skills. And lately, actually, I was at a QA meetup recently, where the whole talk was about how do QA engineers reinvent themselves as DevOps engineers. And to me, that's a non-starter as well. There is a specific QA skill set. You have to have QA people, you have to have ops people. How you organize them as a team, that's a tactical question. But having those skill sets is a strategical question for the success of the company. So I'd like to know the panel view.
No, that's fine. Okay, so I don't know how many. So basically, I think the question is mostly about how do we deal with the, I guess, maintaining the skill sets of both QA, I guess traditional QA, or I don't know, depends what you mean by QA, and having like even the traditional sysadmin. Well,
the code's clean.
Yeah, and so I'll try not to tangent this too far down, like in terms of like beliefs of, should the same person that wrote the code test the code? No. See, and we can talk some other time because that's a whole nother rant. So basically, like engineers, the trickier one, to be honest, seems to be the operational skills and doing that sort of thing. Because basically engineers that we hire, and we tend to be doing as much test driven as we can anyways. So we do a lot of testing at different levels of testing. So the whole, test pyramid of things. And we also do either a lot of pair programming or mob programming or whatever. So there's a good constant, feedback across the entire team. So like the entire team is sort of picking up the same skills. I'm mostly really trying to leverage a lot of the sort of vendor relationships, basically using like vendors and vendor tools to really help out with the operations side, because we get a lot of information from them, and and having like AWS in like coming into the office every other week or every week is also helpful because anybody can go and ask them. The biggest thing that's really still kind of a motivating factor, I think, for a lot of or most teams is that everybody on the team is on PagerDuty. So it's really your incentive is there to understand what it is that you have to manage.
Trying to think back to your original question, Mick. So I did try to address this somewhat in the homogeneous organization when I spoke about the different team leads that I work with and their different skill sets, and specifically the knowledge bases that they can bring to the solution all the time. Coming from the software and internal IBM knowledge to OpenStack specific to the legacy platforms. We consider ourselves an operations group, less so than an engineering, and that's generally how IBM has seen us. So one of the things that I specifically have done, we hire a lot of, IBM specifically hires a lot of college grads. These guys are wicked smart. They've got like masters in comp sci. They can solve any problem I throw at them, but they don't know operations. So one of the biggest things I've done is with my engineers and what they're now doing with other engineers is mentoring, specifically from an operations perspective. So I strongly believe in growing the engineer that you want to hire because I can't hire them. There's no way I can pay them enough. I can't do the long con because this guy's already doing it. And I don't really want to. I want to actually create a larger talent market and talent pool available to everyone. And if I can't keep them at my company, that's another problem I have to solve. But I want them to have the skill sets that they can have the opportunity to move on, because that means I've done my job and my team while they're with me will be better.
So let's get Jeff's.
So I'm the polar opposite. We are a large enterprise, but I guess the stigma is you can't be a DevOps shop when you have that amount of people, and I disagree. I've worked at both that are hugely monolithic, and I've worked at ones, particularly where I am now, where you are, from a bird's eye view, it does look like silos, but it is a DevOps shop. And kind of the first mentality would be is have the group build an automation platform to be able to handle a huge mass of growth. That's the first mentality I think that the team looks for, because you're building something that affects everybody else, and you're not going to be able to build that to serve yourself. You're going to have to build it for people that need to use it. So we'll start with that, especially for the operations side. For the other side, we actually will kind of merge teams or swap individual members of teams. So if we have a member that's strictly, say, a DBA, we'll put him on the infrastructure team for a month. They act as like a liaison for that team, then go back to the DBA team and say, holy shit, you got to see what these guys are doing, you know, and just spread the word. But actually having them part of the team with blood in the game, that really does eventually help.
Right, can I just follow up? So, very quickly.
Okay. All right. Quickly.
So, what you're talking about is what we used to call, back in the day, we used to call it holidaying or holotelling. You go and sit people with different teams, and it's very effective. What I'm talking about, so the question of automation comes up a lot in DevOps, but the question for me is, what are you actually automating? How do you maintain, my big thing is, how do you maintain the operational skill set in what you're doing? Because I'm a passionate believer that DevOps doesn't mean that developers can do operations. They don't know what they're doing in the vast majority of cases. And they need operational people, they need seasoned sysadmins who have an understanding of network security, who have an understanding of all these outlying things that developers by their nature shouldn't have to think about and don't think about when they're writing their code. That needs to be brought into the equation. So my question was around how do you maintain that?
So say you have a new code deployment, you need a new machine. You don't want to depend on somebody to deploy that machine. Would you rather deploy the code and have the system realize this machine doesn't exist, let me deploy the machine for him first, and then push the code there? My team would build that process, because that's the mentality that they have. We know how to build machines, but we also know how to write code to build machines. That way, a year from now, like since January 1st, we've built 800 machines with a team of 10 people. We're not doing it by hand. So we're maintaining the robots that build the machines.
I guess what I wanted to ask is, we haven't heard from a lot of you how your organizational leadership actually influenced the processes that you were talking about implementing. So if anyone has any feedback on that, how that fed in, whether it was pro or con, I mean, what was the interaction with your leadership that made what you were doing successful?
All right, I'll take it. I don't care. This one's easy. So for me, we actually internally, it's about 100 people or so at the company, so it's relatively small. And actually, most of the stuff that I'm talking about, I mean, I'm one of the, one of the implementers, but I'm actually not the person who dreamed up, like, this is what we should do. It's actually the leaders of the organization, specifically our CTO. And VP at the time, I think they were probably very instrumental, but definitely the founders are like 100% into it. And one thing that's nicely unique compared to other places I've worked is that we're actually very transparent about a lot of internal things throughout like the entire company. Like, for example, everybody gets an email every morning that basically tells them how much revenue we made yesterday. And so everybody in the company is kind of all very focused around watching those lines and sort of just sharing in general in terms of information. So that's pretty open. And just as like other sideline examples that go along with this that came from leadership, we don't have an HR department. We have a people team, because a lot of people talk about it like they're not resources, they're people. And so we're actually pushing through that. And we really try really hard too. I mean, the diversity problem and not having a monoculture is challenging in this industry, period. But we're trying to do what we can there as well. So.
All right, 2 more questions.
No interaction of leadership and collaboration.
Let's go right here and then to Bart.
Your leadership is involved.
Depends on perspective.
So one question I had regarding tool selection, Rob, you had mentioned that teams were within, I'm assuming within some sort of reason, allowed to choose whichever tools in their workflow that worked for that perspective. We, as somewhat of an uncontrolled experiment about 2 to 3 years ago now, attempted the same thing. And what we really ended up with was one team using, just for communication tools, for instance, we had one team using AIM, one team using Office Communicator, one team using Slack, one team using Chat, one team using Campfire, one team using IRC. There were 8 at our peak. I forget what the other 2 were.
Sure.
What we actually found was that that kind of freedom enforced silos rather than broke them down. The same thing happened with our ticketing systems, where at peak we had, I forget the exact number, some teams were using Jira, some teams were using Rally, some teams were using the GitHub issue tracker. And what would happen is when one team assigned an issue to another team, if those 2 teams were not using matching issue trackers, those issues would become black holes. My question, I guess, is what do you do to make an experiment like that work so that 2 teams who are not using compatible tools can still interact, can still have visibility, and still have the ability to communicate between each other?
I guess in one respect we're pretty lucky in that like Slack is definitely the chosen tool. So in terms of a like Campfire versus HipChat versus, like, I could see that would be somewhat complicated, and also sort of enforcing silos. So probably growing from a solid base in that case was good. And I don't know, probably a lot of people might not like the answer relating to like ticketing systems. So to me, I'm probably just old school when it comes to Agile and things like that. And to me, firing a ticket and expecting it to go to some other team, I would rather it black holed if you stuck it in a system. Sorry, no offense. But really, it comes down to communication, and I guess that's kind of the topic of the evening. You need to talk to somebody to make sure they understand this ticket in the first place, in my, I guess, limited perspective.
I should take that too.
Yeah, please.
So what was interesting about your question is, and the tools that you outlined, was specifically around, those were all tools used for communication. So it seems like all the companies that I've talked to, and like Boston companies like HubSpot and others who have tried the pick your own tooling, and I think Brightcode's even done this, if all of your communication mediums are standardized, so you can all speak the same language, speak the same way, even if it's not the same language, time zones, whatever, edge cases, hopefully. The tooling of actually running in production, I think this is kind of what you were referring to, is your teams can choose the language and like how they're doing things, but they're still using the same communication mediums, which then facilitates the choice where it counts.
Yeah, and we just don't use ticketing as a communication mean. Yeah, it's just, yeah.
I think you just hit an important caveat. Don't use ticketing as
Yeah, and I think that's kind of what I was alluding to, and that is certainly my preference, and I guess that seems to be the way we go.
Last question for Bart, do you have?
Sure. So I get, tonight's forum is clearly about cross-team collaboration, right? I honestly, hands up to Dave et al. Who put up the conference a couple weeks ago at the DevOps Days. One of my favorite talks was Elliot Murphy from Kanigel, which actually kicked off the conference, right? Talked about how, I won't re-give his talk, but silos aren't necessarily bad. What's bad, maybe in our perception, is how we talk to each other, right? And tonight's talk is clearly about how do we talk to each other. I personally, my personal view is that we need QA, we need operations, we need developers, we need security. Everyone has a different kind of task at hand. so that you don't have conflict of interest, right? And I guess I just like each person to kind of answer. I hear a lot of hey, we're kind of reducing headcount. People are wearing a lot of hats, but how do you deal with that question of conflict of interest? Because if I'm writing the code and I'm tasked with guaranteeing that it's safe and I'm guaranteeing that it's operable, who's checking? Who's actually who has a stake in saying, you know what, maybe you don't know what you're doing, right? So can the panel go around and speak to that?
I've already answered this. I mean, to me, I don't actually I guess the idea around there being a conflict of interest, I don't actually believe to be true. I think that's fundamentally flawed, and so to me, it's like we're generally all in this together, and that kind of comes back to everybody in the company watching the bottom line and trying to push the ball forward and really drive what we do.
What's the size of your company?
It's like 100 people.
100 people.
Yeah, so it's relatively small.
So they say that it's about 150 people when it starts at shift.
That could be.
Yeah, well, I can't speak to that. That's why.
I've worked in companies certainly that are a lot bigger than this, but of course we didn't have this model, right? I've certainly pushed similar ideas, and certainly around the QA thing, even in very large organizations, I've coached work like that before too.
A lot of organizations I haven't seen QA handled particularly well.
Well, the idea is to have the conversation before you're even pushing code, right? And that's.
But also this idea of like you can't have the, whatever fox watching the hen house kind of thing. I really feel that that's a myth. That putting the two resources together is how you get collaboration, and collaboration is what causes.
I wasn't saying that you should have silos. Elliot's talk was about keeping silos but fixing communication.
Yeah, and so if it's two developers that are testing and pushing code.
QA and developers and AppSec and
the whole idea of concept of subject matter experts within their fields and how that collaboration happens, because somebody who's creating the code is going to be, and they're phenomenal at creating code.
They're tasked with creating.
Yeah, and I think that the mentorship model that you spoke to is really kind of like you want a diverse lineup as much as possible. I mean, this is why we want to go with diversity in the organization in general, and it's not just about gender. It's also about skill sets and just like what else are you bringing to the table when we try and hire the next person. But then having that, having everybody sort of participate in sharing like their way of doing stuff and helping others also learn that skill set and sort of distribute it. And so we're really trying to push we're just trying to push where we can to make that actually more effective. So, I don't know if anybody.
So coming from an organization with 330,000 people, it's slightly different. So we have our engineers. There's the theory that I subscribe to of mentoring and building people. Security is not a strong point of mine. The security isn't really a strong point of anybody on my team. It is from an operations perspective, but we actually have a compliance officer who works with us closely for our entire Blue Box division. He's backed up by other compliance people, and then we have the entire IBM security division. If we ever have a breach or something, IBM security rolls in, and that's how it works.
And how's the communication channel?
Security itself is generally as needed.
No, this other entity that you just spoke to.
Compliance is generally around an architectural review. Most of our stuff for SMEs like that is reviews in describing from the engineers how we're doing something.
So after action, kind of
not entirely. Retroactive from security, yes. Compliance is not. It's all forward. So right now we're doing a migration out of one data center into another, and so we've had numerous calls with this compliance officer describing how we're designing systems, the firewalls, and the zoning essentially required in the new system, and making sure that it still follows our compliance. And they understand all that's required by PCI, HIPAA, FedRAMP. That's not information that we need to know, but we need to understand how it impacts us, and that's how they translate.
And because
Have you found that those conversations were kind of in the beginning planning phases, or were they kind of, hey, now that you built something, now you need to rebuild it?
More reactive.
in general, we're usually a reactive organization that mostly believes in code first. So we will have code for idea to make sure that actually is possible or it does make sense, and then we can go through the other process. It comes through an expense, not just in cost, but also in time. Engaging those other parties is very time heavy, where you end up on conference calls of 25 plus people. Yeah, and you're essentially lighting money on fire at that point, so we try to avoid that.
So to answer your question very broadly, I feel like you're speaking to several things. One is organizational size, and then the other is organizational type. So for example, do you have a command and control organization, right? Or do you have one that really is more democratic and more bottom up? And I can't answer that question, or what, and to some extent you're talking about industries too, because industries then carry those histories. So I don't know, like what specifically then?
Well, I was just curious about your personal experience.
Yeah, my personal experience. So my personal experience is that I don't know if people were around for Igor's. He gave a talk before a panel where he talked about sort of like T-shaped employees versus, and it reminds me of that, where, a specializing generalist, and that depending on the type of company you're in, I would say that as an industry, we're moving more toward a specializing generalist model, whereas we came from more of a completely specialist or completely generalist model. But a lot of this is also values, right? So we're talking about organizational values and then how you as an individual fit into that organization and whether or not your values conform to the company's.
The 60-40 concept, I like it. All right, hey, that's it. Thank you so much. Give a round of applause to I want to thank Acquia and James back here. James, step forward for getting this all set up. Thank you.
And we will post not only thanks to Anastas right here, give a round of applause for videoing it. We're going to have the video streams for everybody. We'll be sending it out. And I'll also provide all contact information to our panelists and presenters. So if you have any extra questions that you want to do a sidebar on, you'll have their contact information to do that. So thank you so much, everyone, for participating. Thank you, attendees. Really appreciate your time. Looking forward to the next event. Thank you very much. Oh yeah, and also to respect our vendor host, please pick up whatever garbage you have created. There's trash cans all over the place. Let's keep this place clean. Leave it as you found it. All right. Thank you so much.
People wanted to do the tour. Right here.
And I guess,
I have Jeannie.
Okay.
I have Jeannie over here. If you guys want to take a tour of the facility, here's Jeannie.
Hey guys, we'll spend about 10 minutes. We're on 2 floors, but if you are interested, you need to be with me the whole time. The roof garden. I can't take you guys up to the roof garden. It just opened, and we can't go up there. It's too bad. All right.
Pretty honest. There it is. I'm speaking to everybody. Do you need slides?
It's one of my most favorite jobs. It's so good. It's important. It's important.
No, exactly. I have.
And it's important to get this.
Laura, excited to have you on. We have to get together because I wanted to tell you, so I've been already having conversations about, my whole thing about this year is